Alright, I'm going to give you 5 tips to managing a calorie deficit without slipping up and gaining body fat. So when it comes to being in a calorie deficit, we want to ideally consume food and expend energy to the point that we're in a zone where we've not overconsumed the amount of energy that we eat and that we've not under-expended energy physically. Now, our lifestyle factors will heavily determine the amount of energy that we expend in a day. For example, a labourer's physical job will expend a lot more energy over time, especially than a sedentary office worker. So what can we actively manage and actually control when it comes to trying to stay in a calorie deficit? Tip number 1 is to only buy what you aim to consume. So it's about, don't advise stocking up on highly palatable foods in a multi-buy deal, for example. My advice is to have a list and prioritize shopping when you go to grocery stores. Only really get what you've set out on that list to get, which is going to be like the priority foods. Meats, for example, vegetables, fruit. For vegans, red beans, chickpeas, tofu, lentils. Got to give my vegan friends a couple of options to work with there for some protein-rich vegan foods. Now, it's also a case of maybe if you're somebody who over-consumes and you're susceptible to just overeating foods that are a bit palatable and maybe a bit processed, that might be what's causing you to overeat. Try out just natural sweet foods like frozen fruits, loads of fresh fruit, Greek yogurt, mixing protein powder that's flavoured into your Greek yogurt, and it'll just satisfy or maybe even satiate your sweet tooth so that you don't overconsume and that you don't feel too withdrawn about not having alt sweet, because that's not a life that you'd want to live. It's about adapting and working on not over consuming food and calories. That's the whole purpose of the video. I guess I've just given a sweet protein rich option that you could have as a meal there. Now, I'll not go into the benefits of protein because I've got that listed in my metabolism videos, but it's very efficient for you to be having protein when you're trying to lose fat. Tip number 2 is to realise if there's any point of your 24-hour day that you are just being a disservice to yourself, in terms of, give you an example, like 8 o'clock, it comes round, you've actually had your tea anyway, and you're just in this period of consuming food when you're not actually hungry, and this can lead to a very high building of the calories that you intake. So essentially it would be really ideal for you to head out on like a 20-minute walk with a dog or by yourself, or perform some mindful meditation. That's an option there. Just something that's going to take the mind away from mindlessly eating food when you don't necessarily need it. And this is only a problem for people who are wanting to lose fat, who aren't losing fat. Say if you're somebody who's just so expending in their energy and they actually need that extra food at night just to be able to get to a calorie level that you're not under consuming in calories, then that is okay for those people. So don't get that confused. Maybe you need to apply this to yourself and just to see if you can be efficient at using up more energy in the times that you might just be doing yourself a disservice by doing either activity, and that should help to increase the amount of calories that you expend. So that's pretty much point 2, but point 2 is mainly like the emphasis on substitution, so substituting yourself from disservices to a better service on helping yourself out. That's point 2. Step 3 is easing into a stage of what gets measured gets improved when it comes to knowing what you are consuming. Start off with a scale and things that you can put into a bowl or a jug or a glass. You pour it pretty much anyway, so put that into a scale, and then just take it from your scale into your actual bowl so that you're just understanding what you're giving yourself in terms of measurements. Then that gives you more of a better conscious eye and a gauge on your portion sizing, so that just with things like oats, milk, yogurt, for example, you can easily know how much you're consuming. Get into the habit of doing it for a week, and then you'll pretty much have like the eyeball sort of benefit on gauging the amount of portion size. That's just going to help you initially learn how much energy you're giving yourself, because however many grams that you give yourself on the back of the packet of anything that you really use, it's going to tell you for every 100 grams there's this many calories. If you pour 50 grams, you just half that number. It's not hard, and you'll get the grasp of it. So this tip can be really helpful to just understand how many calories you're giving yourself if you're not using like single packet servings of things, because the bigger the box, you know, it can have a bit of an illusion on how much you're giving yourself. Ultimately, you're kind of better off using single serve portions, but we don't always get foods that come in single serve, so just deal with it. Try to measure what you can. For peanut butter, you can put peanut butter onto a scale, then turn the scale on, then take out the peanut butter that you're using, then that'll give a minus measurement so you can see how much peanut butter you've actually took off the jar, away from the jar, onto the spoon and onto bread or anything that you put your peanut butter on. Just to give tip 3 a interesting ending, peanut butter is not a good source of protein because most of the calories out of peanut butter or nuts come from fat regardless, so you'd have to consume a lot of energy of peanut butter or nuts to just get a sufficient amount of protein, and all it is going to do is just lead you to eating more calories when you could have much lower calorie protein options, especially if you're somebody who needs to be wary of not consuming too much calories. Right, tip number 4, it's to consistently consume protein in your staple meals and way of eating. So if you're someone who has, for example, 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch and dinner, then it's essential that you include protein in all of your meals and just have an even or right amount of protein split between your meals to achieve the protein number that you need per day. So we all have like a target. Basically, we require around 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if you're somebody who weighs 60 kilograms, you'd minimum want to try and hit a protein target of 120 grams of protein for fat loss. If you are 70 kilograms, times 70 by 2, for example, and you'd really want to be looking at trying to hit 130 to 140 grams of protein per day. The more body weight you have, the more protein your body will require for its functions. You can use calculators to determine how much protein that you will need as well online, or just send me a message if you are struggling with this and I can help you out. Daily protein intake targets often get underachieved, and all that's doing is a disservice to the person who's wanting to lose fat. So do make sure that you can work on achieving that sufficient amount of protein per day by having protein in your staple meals. That's going to help you work towards your sufficient protein target, and that is very beneficial when it comes to fat loss. I've got a video on metabolism too, which I advise you watching, and I talk about the benefits of protein when it comes to losing fat. Tip number 5 is to work on some life structure when it comes to your form of eating. So know what you're going to be eating the next day, especially for like your breakfast and dinner. Don't lead a spontaneous life of mindlessly grabbing different types of food so that it's just messing you up in terms of you couldn't exactly tell somebody what you've just consumed yesterday because you completely forgot and it's just too far to think back. Pre-plan what you're going to be eating the next day. It's just like making a packed lunch. Prepare it, well, it's like prep in it, and then just prep your food, have it ready, and then eat what you've set yourself out to eat. Allow yourself to prepare what you're going to be eating, especially if you're a busy person. For the next day, you've got things to take with you. You're not having to stress about nothing because you know that you've given yourself a fulfilling meal and you know yourself better than anyone else. Choose the right foods for yourself. So that's my 5 tips on how to control yourself in a calorie deficit without over-consuming calories and slipping up. So be conscious that most of the tips were in regards to limiting the calorie intake over calorie expending. There was one substitution of expending more in the time that you might actually like consume a lot of food when you don't need it. Apart from that, it's far easier to consume less calories than to try and expend what you've overconsumed, because that's quite tough to do. You can't outtrain a bad diet, remember. If you're in need of any help when it comes to calculating, like, James, how many calories do I need for losing fat, or how much protein do I need in this sense, then please send me a message and I will help you out. Thanks for looking at these tips or watching video even. If you made it this far especially, I do appreciate that. Right, Sithy.